Now that you've adjusted all of the settings in camera, you now have control over the look of your video. But you also need to pay very close attention to the lenses that you are using. Lenses come in all different shapes, sizes, and prices, and you can also get them in two different categories, primes and zooms. But the lenses that we choose to use can have a big effect on our overall filming. I would argue that choosing the right lens is more important than choosing the right camera. You can get really beautiful footage when you're using the perfect lens and an okay camera. But if you've got a great camera and a terrible lens, it's going to be really difficult to get that great footage that you're looking for. So lens choice is really important. Now, first up, I'm going to talk all about the focal length, and focal length is referring to the distance that the lens is going to zoom in on. And there is a scale. Now, the smaller numbers, so 10, 11, 12, these are going to be really wide angle lenses. So if you want to capture a landscape or a building, then you want to choose one of these wider focal lengths. So you're looking for 8mm, 10mm, 16mm. These are really wide lenses. And then of course, if you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, you can get 250mm, 300mm, 500, 1000, and these are zooming in. So these are very close. But for most cases, you don't really need anything more than 150, for example. So as long as you've got some lenses that cover you from about 16 all the way up to 150, then you should have enough for most filming. So that means you'll probably ask the question, can I just use a zoom lens that goes from 16 all the way up to 150? Yes, you can, but you might struggle to find a lens that gives you all of those different focal lengths. This lens here is great. I use this lens for around 5 years. This is the Canon 24-105. So I've got 24mm all the way up to 105mm. And it's a great lens, but the problem is with zoom lenses is they're not quite as clean as prime lenses. Now a zoom lens is going to give you that different focal length, so you can start at 24 and go all the way up to that higher number, whereas a prime lens just gives you one option. It just gives you 50, 85, 35. So they are a little bit more inconvenient versus zoom lenses, but the quality of the lens is far superior than a zoom lens. When you're looking for a lens, you want to look at what focal length it can shoot or what range of focal lengths it can shoot. But you also want to pay close attention to the lowest aperture that it can open up to. Now this lens here can shoot down to f4, which is okay, but the second it starts to get a bit dark, the video footage gets really noisy. That's because I can't pull the aperture down even further, so I have to increase the ISO if I can't bring any more lights. So the footage can get really noisy with this lens. But this lens behind me here, the one you're seeing in the background, this is a Sigma Art 18 to 35mm lens, and that drops down to f1.8. Now f1.8 is obviously a lot lower. That's going to give me a lot more light, and it will also give me that background blur that I'm looking for that cinematic look. So when you're buying your lenses, you want to pay close attention to the focal length, but also the lowest possible aperture. And the problem is with some zoom lenses is it might say it can do f4, but for example, this lens, when you zoom in, the lowest aperture increases. So if you're set to the widest, 24, and you're at your lowest possible aperture, which is f4, if you zoom all the way into 105, the bottom aperture now increases up to around f5.3 or somewhere around that level. So this means when you go into those higher focal lengths, you're losing even more light from your shot. Now, the great thing is with prime lenses, which is the one where you have the fixed focal length, so a 50mm lens, is because we're not zooming, you don't have to worry about this range of aperture changing. You know this lens is bottoming out at f1.8, and every time I film with this lens, I've always got that option of going down to f1.8. I'm not limited by the zoom. So that brings me on to the next question of why would you choose one lens over another? What are the pros and cons of a zoom and a prime lens? Well, a zoom lens is great because you've got flexibility. You've got 24 all the way up to 105 in this example. But you can get other lenses as well, which give you a different range. So rather than carrying 3 or 4 different lenses, you can just have one lens and you've got all the focal lengths that you would need just from this one lens. You never have to worry about changing this on set. But of course, the cons of having that zoom lens is, yes, the bottom aperture is going to change as you zoom through the different focal lengths. And you'll also find that some zoom lenses can be a little bit soft as well. So they might soften off at the edges, which might look a bit amateur, and it might ruin the quality of the image that you're getting. Whereas prime lenses, they're a lot sharper consistently. The quality of them are generally better, and you know that whatever the aperture is set to, that is what you can always go down to. You're never having to worry about losing light if you zoom in. because you can't zoom in. But of course, the problem is with prime lenses is you have to have a load of them with you and you have to keep swapping them out every time you want a different look. But I would argue that having prime lenses does make you more intentional as a filmmaker, because it means rather than standing back and just crashing into a 105, you can either physically get closer or get creative to get the shot that you're looking for. But of course, it does depend on what you're capturing. If you're filming documentaries, then having prime lenses isn't going to be great, because you need to be able to quickly adapt and change through different focal lengths as you're filming and documenting whatever you are filming. But if you're in a studio, you're doing a music video, you're doing something where there's more control, you can stop, cut, take 5, change a lens, and then get back into it, a prime lens is probably going to be a better option, because your image is going to be sharper and you'll get better footage as a result. So yes, all of the settings in your camera do have a big effect on how your video looks, but so do the lenses that you choose to put on your camera. So if you're looking to buy some new lenses, then really think about what works best for you, what type of focal length you want. Do you want prime or zoom lenses? What's the aperture that you want to be able to reach? Do you want to try and get as low as f1.8? Or alternatively, if you just already have a lens or have a few different lenses, then use this information to help guide you on how to frame your images and what focal lengths you want to be using when you're making your videos.